Is it possible to conquer fear? We're going to talk about that and some other key concepts from the book The Art of Fear by Kristen Ulmer. Welcome to another video and discussion on the topic of fear. My first introduction to Kristen Ulmer was when my friend, who is a mountain bike coach at Sedona Mountain Bike Academy, recommended that I listen to the podcast by Gabby Reece where she interviewed Kristen Ulmer. One really interesting thing that I thought Kristen mentioned in the podcast was she talked about a willingness to feel fear and how that supports growth. Now, the thing that I thought was so interesting was she didn't say a willingness to suppress fear or a willingness to conquer fear or to defeat fear. It was a willingness to feel fear. That really intrigued me, and that was a lot of what propelled me into buying the book and wanting to learn more. Just for a little bit of background on who Kristen Ulmer is, she had a career in the 90s as a big mountain skier. So the kind of skiing where you see them drop skiers off on the top of a jaggedy peak and then they ski down the cliffs, that's the kind of stuff that she was doing. She found that she had kind of an unhealthy relationship with fear in her own way and started really studying like a lot of Zen philosophy and things like that, and she's become something of an expert on fear, and she helps people have a healthier relationship with it. Now, I do recommend this book, but I will let you know if you read it. Just know the first half is a little bit slow, it drags a little bit, but I do think it's worth a read. I'm not going to give you a whole synopsis because if you want to know more, you should definitely read the book. But I did want to point out a couple of key concepts from the first half of this book that I found really interesting. All of us, whether we're feeling fear or any other emotion, sometimes we might fall into the pitfall of wanting to label these emotions as good or as bad. You know, we don't need to look at fear as a bad thing that we need to get out of our lives completely. Like, it serves a purpose, and we kind of need to honor it in that sense. I know that I've definitely been guilty of giving fear a negative label. I found it kind of interesting in reading Kristen's book that she actually has had kind of a different relationship with fear in the fact that she's felt that she was quite addicted to fear at sometimes. I found that fascinating because I can't relate to that, but I'd love to know, post in the comments if you've ever felt that you were addicted to fear. Another concept that I wanted to touch on is the idea that suppressing emotions like fear isn't a long-term solution. In her book, Ulmer talks about what happens when you suppress emotions. You know, emotions have energy, and energy doesn't just disappear, it goes somewhere. When you really suppress these emotions, they tend to pop up in our lives in other places, and sometimes it's ugly. So with the example of fear, suppressing that could pop up in my life in other ways as just generalized anxiety or depression. It might show up as anger. Somewhere in either an interview or the book, she referred to it as emotional whack-a-mole. You know, you try to push it down in one place, it's just going to pop up somewhere else. And I do really believe that there is something to that. Now, I'm a lifelong emotional suppressor, so it shouldn't have come as a surprise to me that really learning to understand what it is I'm feeling and recognize those emotions when they come up, that was going to be an important thing. It's something that kind of keeps coming up in my life, so I guess I really need to get in touch with this. Another thing that sometimes people might do is replacement. So they might try to replace a negative emotion with a positive one. But I don't really think that always works, and a lot of the stuff that Kristen Ulmer says kind of supports the same idea. I feel like this can kind of align pretty well with the concept of toxic positivity, which, if that's not a term that you've heard of, I just want to read this definition because I think it's such a good one. This comes from psychologygroup.com. We define toxic positivity as an excessive and ineffective overgeneralization of a happy, optimistic state across all situations. The process of toxic positivity results in denial, minimization, and invalidation of the authentic human emotional experience. Now, there is something to be said for the law of attraction and how thinking positively and feeling positively can invite other positive things into your life. But I do think that when it's taken to an extreme and not allowing yourself to feel the range of human emotions, that's when I think it becomes toxic positivity. Now that we've talked about some of the things that Kristen Ulmer suggests don't work as a long-term solution for fear, stay tuned, because in an upcoming video we're going to talk more about Kristen's book and get into some of the things that she recommends to do instead. And I want to hear from you guys in the comments. Do you feel like you have a positive relationship with fear? And if so, what are some things that have helped you? Do you feel like you've been guilty of negatively labeling fear and other emotions? Are you an emotional suppressor? I want to hear from you guys. I want to hear your thoughts. I'll make sure that I link that Gabby Reece podcast episode with Kristen Ulmer, and I will also link Kristen's book on Amazon. Thanks so much for watching. Get dusty. Now that we've talked about some of the things, stay tuned, because in the next... Really?